Corrupt racist cops frame a black man to hide their crimes, not knowing he's an undercover DEA agent. Their actions trigger a federal sting operation that uncovers the deepest crimes you can think of. Welcome to Podcast Stories. I'm your host, Mark Johnson. If you love your family and love to listen to interesting stories like this, subscribe to our channel. And now, put your headphones on and let's dive into this story.
The fluorescent lights of the Hope Community Center buzzed overhead as Marcus Thompson organized stacks of donated books. His methodical movements and focused expression revealed years of practiced discipline, though none of the teenagers helping him would guess his true profession. The center's walls, covered with motivational posters and college preparation materials, had become as familiar to him as his own home over the past year. "Mr. Thompson, where should we put these SAT prep books?" asked Jeremy, a local high school junior who regularly volunteered at the center. Marcus looked up from his task, his warm smile masking years of undercover work. "Let's put those on the front desk. More students have been asking about them lately." Marcus checked his watch. 5:30 p.m. He needed to wrap up soon to make it home for dinner with Anna. His wife had been particularly insistent about family dinners lately, perhaps sensing something was off about his extended hours. The community center served as his perfect cover. Who would suspect a dedicated community volunteer of being a DEA agent? The position allowed him to observe the neighborhood's dynamics, while genuinely helping local youth. He'd seen too many communities torn apart by drugs to not take this part of his job seriously. Across town, in the dimly lit break room of the police station, officers Jake Martinez and Tony Sullivan huddled over coffee cups, their conversation barely above a whisper. The evening shift was starting, and the station was relatively empty. "The Watson case is becoming a problem," Jake muttered, his coffee untouched. "His lawyers asking questions about the evidence we logged." Tony leaned back in his chair, a dismissive smirk on his face. "Already handled it. Evidence went missing during transfer. Paperwork's been adjusted." He tapped his fingers on the table. "But we need to be more careful. These small-time dealers aren't worth the hassle anymore. We need something bigger," Jake agreed, his eyes darting to the door as another officer passed by. "Something that'll keep us set for a while." In a modern office building downtown, Special Agent Sarah Chen stood before a group of DEA officials, pointing to photographs on a digital display. The images showed various locations around the city, including the community center where Marcus worked. "Agent Thompson has identified 3 major distribution points," Chen reported, clicking through surveillance photos. "The operation is larger than we initially suspected. Local law enforcement appears compromised, which is why we've maintained strict communication protocols." The room tensed at the mention of compromised police. One senior agent leaned forward. "How deep does the corruption go?" "We're not certain," Chen admitted, "but Thompson's position is crucial. He's gained the community's trust while mapping the network. His cover is solid. Family man, community volunteer. Even his wife believes he's a former accountant who switched to social work." She pulled up another image, this one showing Marcus at a community event. He's positioned perfectly to expose both the drug operation and the corrupt officers protecting it. "But we need more time. If his cover is blown." She left the sentence unfinished. The meeting continued with tactical discussions. But one thing was clear. Marcus Thompson walked a dangerous line between worlds. His work at the community center wasn't just a cover. It represented the very communities he was trying to protect. Meanwhile, corrupt officers like Jake and Tony represented everything he was fighting against. As the day wound down, Marcus locked up the community center, exchanging friendly waves with the last volunteers. He checked his secure phone. No messages from his handlers. Everything appeared normal, but years of undercover work had taught him that normal was often when things were most dangerous. He couldn't know that at that very moment, in the police station break room, Jake and Tony were hatching a plan that would test his cover to its limits. Nor could he know that his wife Anna's growing concerns about his late hours would soon lead her down a path that would change everything. Jake's patrol car sat idle in the station's back parking lot, windows fogged from the early morning humidity. Inside, he and Tony reviewed their hastily assembled plan. A manila envelope between them contained what would become their manufactured evidence against Marcus Thompson. "I pulled his daily schedule," Tony said, spreading out printed surveillance photos. "He's consistent. Parks in the same spot at the community center every morning at 8:15. Always alone that early." Jake examined a small bag of white powder. "Are you sure about the amounts? We need enough to make it federal, but not so much it draws too much attention. 2 kilos. Enough for intent to distribute. I've got a CI who'll swear he bought from Thompson last week." Tony's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "The paperwork's already backdated. Just need to plant it in his car." "What about cameras? Disabled the one covering his usual spot. Maintenance issue." Tony's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We do this right, Thompson takes the fall, and the heat from internal affairs backs off us." Across town, Anna Thompson stood in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus hadn't come home last night. Again. His text claimed he was working late on a grant proposal, but something felt off. This wasn't the first time. "I'm telling you, Sarah, something's not right," Anna said to her friend. "He's been different lately, distracted. His hours at the center keep getting longer. But when I offered to help with the grant writing, he changed the subject." She pulled up the community center's website on her laptop. "The center's last grant was approved 6 months ago." I checked. "So what's he really working on?" "Maybe he's planning something special for your anniversary," Sarah suggested. "That's next month." Anna scrolled through her phone's photos, stopping on one from last week. Marcus looked tense, even while smiling. "I'm going to drive by the center today. Something doesn't add up." The community center's parking lot was half empty when Marcus pulled in at 8:15. He parked in his usual spot, gathering his briefcase and the morning's paperwork. His secure phone had buzzed earlier, a warning about increased police activity in the area. Nothing specific, but enough to put him on alert. He didn't notice Jake's unmarked car turning into the lot until the lights flashed. A second patrol car, Tony's, blocked the exit. Marcus's training kicked in. Assess, adapt, maintain cover. But as Jake approached with his hand on his weapon, Marcus realized this wasn't a random stop. "Step out of the vehicle, Mr. Thompson," Jake called out, his voice carrying across the empty lot. "Hands where we can see them." Marcus complied, his mind racing. Breaking cover now would compromise months of work and potentially endanger his family. He had to play this straight. "What's this about, officer?" he asked, keeping his voice steady as Tony began searching his car. "Got a tip about drug activity," Jake said, roughly patting Marcus down. "Someone's been using the community center as a distribution point." Tony's triumphant shout came from the car. "Look what we have here." He emerged holding a black duffel bag Marcus had never seen before. "Want to explain this, Thompson?" Marcus watched as Tony unzipped the bag, revealing carefully packaged bricks of white powder. His stomach dropped. This was a setup, and a professional one. They'd chosen their timing perfectly. No witnesses, no cameras, and his D backup wouldn't know he'd been compromised until it was too late. "That's not mine," Marcus said, knowing it wouldn't matter. "I've never seen that bag before." "That's what they all say." Jake slammed Marcus against the car, cuffs clicking into place. "Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute. You have the right to remain silent." As they led him to the patrol car, Marcus caught movement near the center's entrance. A familiar car, Anus pulled into the lot, then quickly backed out. His heart sank. This wasn't just about him anymore. Anna had seen everything, and now she was part of it too. The patrol car's door slammed shut, and Marcus watched his world unravel through the window. Jake and Tony had no idea they'd just arrested a federal agent, but they'd managed to put his operation, his cover, and now his family at risk. As they drove away, Marcus's mind raced to formulate a plan. He needed to contact his handlers, but more importantly, He needed to make sure Anna stayed safe. The interrogation room's harsh fluorescent lights cast unflattering shadows across Marcus's face as he sat handcuffed to the metal table. Through the two-way mirror, Jake and Tony watched their suspect with growing satisfaction. Inside the room, Detective Miller flipped through a file, deliberately taking his time. 2 kilos of cocaine, Mr. Thompson. That's quite a jump from community service work. Marcus remained silent, his mind working through scenarios. The room's camera had a blinking red light. Everything was being recorded. If he revealed his DEA status now, it would compromise not just his operation, but potentially other ongoing investigations. But something about the setup nagged at him. "Why'd you pick me?" Marcus asked suddenly, watching Miller's reaction carefully. Out of all the people at the center, Miller paused, just slightly, before answering. "The evidence led us here. Evidence you planted." Marcus leaned forward. "But why go through all this trouble, unless—" He studied the detective's face. "Unless someone's getting nervous about what I might have seen." Outside the interrogation room, Tony shifted uncomfortably. "He's asking too many questions." "Shut up," Jake snapped, his eyes fixed on the scene before them. Across town, Anna sat in her car outside the local news station, her hands shaking as she watched the noon broadcast on her phone. The anchor's voice filled the small space. Local community center worker Marcus Thompson was arrested this morning on drug trafficking charges. Thompson, known for his work with at-risk youth, she turned it off, unable to watch more. The image of Marcus being handcuffed played over and over in her mind. It didn't make sense. None of it did. The Marcus she knew spent weekends helping kids prepare for college entrance exams. He tracked down scholarships for students who couldn't afford application fees. He wasn't a drug dealer. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah. "Just saw the news. This has to be a mistake. What can I do?" Anna started typing a response when she noticed a police cruiser slowly driving past. The officer inside made no attempt to hide his surveillance. Her finger hovered over the call button for Marcus's lawyer, but something stopped her. If this was as wrong as she suspected, they needed more than just a lawyer. Back at the station, Marcus's interrogation had taken an unexpected turn. Detective Miller had left the room, replaced by Jake himself. The change set off warning bells in Marcus's trained mind. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake said, his voice low enough to barely register on the room's recording equipment. "You're going to confess to running drugs through the community center. Simple, clean. Do that, and this stays at possession with intent. Fight it." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Well, let's just say we found some interesting things on your home computer. Things involving minors." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. They were setting him up for something far worse than drug charges. "You'd destroy my whole life to cover your tracks." "Your life," Jake laughed. "Man, you did that yourself when you started asking questions about certain shipments." "Yeah, we noticed. You're not as subtle as you think." The pieces clicked into place. His investigation had gotten too close to something bigger. Something that had corrupt cops like Jake and Tony nervous enough to risk framing a seemingly innocent community worker. In the DEA's local field office, Special Agent Chen slammed down her phone. "Thompson's been arrested on drug charges." The room erupted in controlled chaos. "How long?" someone asked. 3 hours ago. Local news is already running the story. Chen pulled up the police report on her screen. "This is wrong. The timeline, the evidence. It's all too neat. We need to move carefully," her supervisor warned. "If Thompson's cover is still intact, if we wait too long, he'll end up dead or facing charges that'll ruin him," Chen argued. "They're already processing him for holding." "Get me everything on the arresting officers," the supervisor ordered. "And find out who else had access to the evidence lockup. Thompson's not the only one we're investigating anymore." As Marcus was led to his cell, he caught snippets of conversation between officers. His reputation was already spreading through the station. The trusted community worker who'd betrayed everyone. But beneath their words, he sensed something else. Fear. These cops weren't just following orders, they were protecting something bigger. In his cell, Marcus sat on the thin mattress, his back against the cold wall. He had no way of knowing if his D-handlers had been notified, no way to warn Anna about what might come next. The corrupt officers had chosen their timing perfectly, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed he was working alone. From her car, Anna watched the police station, her journalist friend's words echoing in her mind. Something's not right about this arrest. The timeline's too perfect, the evidence too convenient. She had decisions to make, decisions that would either save her husband or put them both in even greater danger. The holding cell's dim lighting cast long shadows as Marcus waited for his scheduled phone call. He'd been carefully watching the guards' rotation patterns, a habit from his D-training that now proved invaluable. The burner phone, carefully hidden in his shoe before his arrest, felt like a ticking time bomb. During the midnight shift change, Marcus seized his moment. The replacement guard was Walsh, young, easily distracted, and fond of lengthy bathroom breaks. As soon as Walsh disappeared down the corridor, Marcus retrieved the phone with practiced efficiency. His fingers moved swiftly over the keypad, dialing his handler's secure line. 1 ring, 2 rings. On the third, a connection. "Agent Chen," he whispered, keeping his voice barely audible. "Thompson, what's your status?" "Compromised. Jake, Martinez, and Tony Sullivan. They're protecting something bigger than the call." Cut off abruptly as footsteps approached. Marcus barely had time to conceal the phone before Walsh returned, accompanied by Jake. "Making friends with the locals, Thompson." Jake's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Time for a cell transfer. Can't have you getting too comfortable." Across town, Aina sat in a dimly lit coffee shop, across from Detective James Carter, a weathered man with tired eyes and a reputation for being one of the few honest cops left in the department. "Mrs. Thompson," Carter began, stirring his untouched coffee, "what you're suggesting is serious. Corrupt officers planted evidence." He leaned forward. "Why come to me?" Anna pulled out a folder. "Because you investigated Jake Martinez 3 years ago for evidence tampering. The case disappeared, but you never stopped watching him, did you?" Carter's expression hardened. "How did you? I have friends at the newspaper." Aina's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "They've been tracking suspicious arrests. Marcus isn't the first, just the most public." "If you're right," Carter said slowly, "this goes beyond a few dirty cops." He glanced around the nearly empty shop. "But I need to know. Are you sure about your husband? Really sure?" Anna hesitated, remembering the odd hours, the secretive phone calls, the grand proposal that never existed. "I'm sure he's not what they say he is. The rest," she met Carter's gaze, "the rest I need your help to figure out." Back at the station, Jake paced in the evidence room, phone pressed to his ear. "We've got a problem. Thompson's wife is asking questions. She's been seen with Carter." Tony's voice crackled through the speaker. "Carter, that persistent bastard's still digging. It gets worse. I just got word from our friends upstairs. Someone's been accessing our case files, old ones, from the Watson investigation." "Shit." Tony's curse was barely audible. "If they connect those cases, exactly." Jake stopped pacing. "We need to contain this, fast." "What about Thompson?" Jake glanced at the security monitor showing Marcus in his new cell. "He's not talking, yet. But his wife meeting with Carter changes things. We might need to accelerate our timeline." The conversation ended abruptly as Officer Walsh appeared in the doorway. "Sir, there's something you should see." In his new cell, Marcus lay on the hard bunk, appearing to sleep while his mind raced. The interrupted call to Agent Chen might have been enough, if she traced it, if she understood his reference to Jake and Tony, but he couldn't count on maybes. His years of undercover work had taught him to always have a backup plan. The cell transfer worried him. It wasn't standard procedure, especially not this late. They were isolating him, probably away from security cameras and regular patrols. The question was, were they planning to silence him, Or did they have something else in mind? In the parking lot outside the station, Detective Carter sat in his car, reviewing the notes Anna had given him. 23 suspicious arrests in the past year, all following the same pattern. Evidence appearing at convenient moments, witnesses changing statements, cases wrapped up too neatly. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Watch the evidence in the Thompson case. It's not what it seems. Carter started his car, his decision made. He'd been waiting years to bring down Jake and Tony. Maybe this time, with Anna's help and this mysterious new ally, he'd finally succeed. But first, he needed to figure out who Marcus Thompson really was, and why Jake and Tony were so determined to destroy him. As night settled over the city, all the players in this dangerous game moved their pieces, unaware that their separate missions were about to collide in ways none of them could predict. The police station's archives were eerily quiet at 3 a.m. Anna crouched behind a filing cabinet, her heart pounding as footsteps passed by. Detective Carter's security card had worked, just as he'd promised. But getting into the restricted section had been the easy part. Third row, cabinet marked 2022-2022. She whispered to herself, recalling Carter's instructions. The metal drawer slid open with a soft hiss, revealing meticulously labeled folders. Her fingers trembled as she photographed document after document with her phone. Evidence logs, arrest reports, internal investigations that went nowhere, all connected to Jake and Tony, all following the same pattern. But it was a misplaced USB drive, tucked between files, that made her pause. The drive's contents revealed a horrifying truth. Jake and Tony weren't just planting evidence, they were protecting a network of drug distribution that reached into City Hall itself. Weekly payoff schedules, coded names, delivery routes. It was all there. A noise from the corridor froze her in place. The beam of a flashlight swept past the archive's frosted glass. Anna held her breath, pressing herself against the wall until the footsteps faded. Meanwhile, in his isolation cell, Marcus had reached his breaking point. The DEA's protocols were clear about maintaining cover, but they hadn't anticipated this scenario. His captors had made a critical error in their eagerness to silence him. They'd given him too much time to think. During his last interrogation, he'd noticed something crucial. The evidence bags containing the planted drugs had serial numbers. Standard procedure required these numbers to match the original seizure logs. If Jake and Tony had rushed their frame-up job, Marcus sat up on his bunk as Walsh passed by on his rounds. "Officer," he called out, "I need to make a statement." Walsh hesitated, then radioed it in. Minutes later, a sleepy-looking desk sergeant arrived with a recording device. Marcus began speaking, his words carefully chosen. "I want to report a series of irregularities in evidence handling procedures." He started with seemingly mundane details, building a foundation that would eventually expose the entire operation. If his D-training had taught him anything, it was that the biggest cases often cracked through the smallest inconsistencies. Across town, Detective Carter received an encrypted email. Opening it revealed a single image, a surveillance photo of Anna leaving the police station's back entrance. Time-stamped just minutes ago. "Damn it," he muttered, grabbing his keys. He'd told her to wait, to let him handle the archive search. But Anna Thompson had proven to be as stubborn as she was resourceful. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a federal area code. "Detective Carter. This is Special Agent Chen with the D. We need to talk about Marcus Thompson." Carter's grip tightened on his steering wheel. "I'm listening, not over the phone. Meet me at Riverside Park in 20 minutes. And detective, make sure you're not followed." In the station's evidence room, Jake stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Someone had accessed the restricted archives, and the security logs showed Detective Carter's credentials. "It's falling apart," he muttered into his phone. "Thompson's wife got into the archives. She has the files. Take care of it." Tony's voice was cold. "Both of them. The feds are sniffing around. If we move against them now, then we all go down anyway." Tony cut him off. "Call our friends upstairs. It's time to clean house. Jake ended the call, his hand shaking slightly as he opened his desk drawer. The unmarked gun inside had been waiting for a moment like this. But as he reached for it, a new message popped up on his screen, an internal alert about Marcus Thompson's latest statement. Reading it, Jake's blood ran cold. Thompson wasn't just fighting back. He was systematically dismantling their entire operation, starting with the evidence logs that Jake himself had falsified. In her car, Anna clutched the USB drive, her other hand gripping her phone as she waited for Carter's call. The documents she'd found weren't just about Marcus anymore. They revealed a conspiracy that reached into every corner of local law enforcement. She didn't know that at that very moment, 3 separate groups were converging on her location. Jake with his unmarked gun, D agents led by Chen, and Detective Carter racing against time. The truth about Marcus, the corruption, and the drug network was about to explode into the open. If they all survived the night, the prison transport van lurched around a corner, its single occupant studying the route through the small window grate. Marcus had counted 3 wrong turns. This wasn't the standard path to the county jail. His years of training kicked into high gear as the van slowed near an abandoned warehouse district. Now or never, he muttered. The handcuff key, lifted from Walsh during a seemingly clumsy stumble, had been burning a hole in his palm for the last 10 minutes. The transport guard, a rookie Marcus didn't recognize, was alone and distracted by his phone. As the van stopped at a red light, Marcus made his move. The cuffs clicked open silently. He'd identified 3 possible escape routes, but only one offered the cover he needed. When the guard turned to check on him, Marcus was already moving. The next 30 seconds were a blur of precise movements. A swift strike to the guard's throat, preventing any radio call. The rear door's emergency release, memorized during his initial transport. A controlled roll onto the empty street, using the van's bulk as cover from passing cars. Marcus disappeared into the shadows of the warehouse district, his mind racing. The transport error was no accident. Jake and Tony had planned to make him disappear, but they'd underestimated how many similar operations he'd run during his D career. Across town, Anna paced in a safe house Detective Carter had arranged, a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. The USB drive's contents were backed up to 3 separate locations, insurance against what she knew was coming. Her burner phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Marcus is out. Go to the secondary location. Trust no one but Chen. Anna's hands trembled as she gathered her evidence. The name Chen meant nothing to her, but if this person knew about Marcus's escape, a knock at the door froze her in place. Through the peephole, she saw Detective Carter, but something was off about his stance. Mrs. Thompson, Carter's voice carried a warning she couldn't quite place. We need to move, now. Why? She kept her distance from the door. Because Jake knows where you are. Carter glanced over his shoulder, and he's not alone. Anna's training years of living with an undercover agent without knowing it had taught her to trust her instincts. She grabbed her backup bag and headed for the bathroom window, just as she heard multiple footsteps in the hallway. Marcus moved through the city's shadows with practiced efficiency, his destination clear. The community center, his cover location for so long, had one secret he'd never shared with his handlers. A hidden compartment behind his officer's filing cabinet contained emergency supplies, cash, and most importantly, a secure satellite phone. As he approached the building, movement caught his eye. A figure in the parking lot, Anna. His heart jumped to his throat. She was supposed to be in protective custody. Don't move, a voice commanded from behind him. Marcus turned slowly to find Tony, gun raised. You're getting sloppy, Tony, Marcus said calmly. No backup, don't need it for a cornered rat. Tony's smile was cold. Jake's taking care of your wife right now. Shame about the motel fire they'll find you both in. Marcus saw the moment of opportunity before Tony did. A car's headlights swept the parking lot, causing Tony to squint. In that split second, Marcus closed the distance. The fight was brief, but brutal. Marcus's detraining against Tony's street experience. When it ended, Tony lay unconscious, his own handcuffs securing him to a drain pipe. Anna reached Marcus just as he finished securing Tony. Their eyes met, years of secrets hanging between them. "You're not really an accountant, are you?" Her voice carried a hint of both hurt and admiration. "And you didn't really need Carter's help to access those files, did you?" He managed a small smile. "We need to move. Jake's coming." "I know who they're working for," Anna said, pulling out the USB drive. "The whole operation, Marcus. It goes all the way to..." Gunfire interrupted her revelation. Jake had arrived, and he wasn't alone. As Marcus pulled Anna behind a parked car, he realized the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but whether the entire corrupt system would finally be exposed. Tony stirred, struggling against his restraints. "You don't understand what you're doing," he called out. "This is bigger than all of us." Marcus checked his stolen weapons ammunition. One clip, maybe enough to get them to safety. But first, they needed to get to his office, to that satellite phone. It was time to bring in everything the D had. "Ready?" he asked Anna. She gripped the USB drive tighter. Together. Gunfire peppered the community center's brick facade as Marcus and Anna crouched behind a dumpster. The parking lot had become a war zone, with Jake coordinating at least 3 other shooters from behind their patrol cars. "My office," Marcus whispered to Anna. "There's a secure line. We just need to get past them." "Through the basement," Anna replied, pulling out her phone. "I found the building plans while investigating your late nights. There's a service tunnel the maintenance crew uses." Marcus stared at his wife with newfound respect. "How long have you been investigating me?" "Long enough to know you're not dirty. The rest," she met his eyes, "you can explain later." A new volley of shots forced them lower. Marcus counted the firing patterns. 4 distinct weapons. Jake was getting desperate, bringing in this much firepower in public. "Cover me," Marcus said, handing Anna the stolen gun. She handled it with surprising confidence. "Service entrance is 20 yards left." Anna nodded. "I'll draw their fire right. There's something you should know. I planted cameras in the evidence room 3 days ago. Everything Jake and Tony did, it's recorded." Before Marcus could respond, a familiar voice cut through the night. Detective Carter's megaphone echoed across the lot. "This is the police. Cease fire immediately." The distraction was all they needed. As Jake's team turned toward the new threat, Marcus and Anna sprinted for the service door. Anna's keycard, swiped from the station's security office during her investigation, granted them access. Inside the dimly lit tunnel, Marcus finally asked the question burning in his mind. "How did you get so good at this?" "I'm a data analyst for the FBI's cybercrime division," Anna admitted, checking corners as they moved. "That's why I was transferred here last year. We've been investigating the same corruption ring. I just didn't know my husband was D." Marcus processed this revelation as they climbed the maintenance stairs. Both of them undercover, both investigating the same case, neither knowing about the other. Someone in the federal system had a twisted sense of humor. Above them, they heard Jake's voice through the building's walls. "Find them. They're in the building." The stairwell door opened to Marcus's office corridor, just 20 feet to his secure line. But as they rounded the corner, they found Sarah, Anna's supposed friend, waiting with a drawn weapon. "Agent Chen sends her regards," Sarah said, lowering the gun. "We've got the building surrounded. Jake's team is pinned down." "You're D2, Anna asked incredulously. "Someone had to watch your husband's back." Sarah gestured toward the office. "But we've got bigger problems. The USB drive you found, it triggered some serious alarms upstairs. Senator Morrison just called an emergency press conference for morning." Marcus reached behind his filing cabinet, retrieving the satellite phone. "Morrison's involved. He's running the whole operation," Anna explained. "The evidence I found links him directly to every major drug shipment in the state. Jake and Tony were just his cleanup crew. Gunfire erupted from the stairwell. Jake's voice carried up. "It's over, Thompson. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Sarah took up position by the door. "Make your call. We'll hold them here." Marcus dialed as Anna set up her laptop, transferring the USB's contents to a secure server. Sarah's radio crackled with updates. D teams moving in, FBI backup en route, local SWAT containing the scene. "Wait," Anna said suddenly, staring at her screen. "There's something else here. Building plans, shell companies. Morrison's not just running drugs. He's planning something bigger. Tomorrow night." A bullet shattered the office window. Sarah returned fire as Marcus relayed the information to his handlers. The pieces were falling into place. Morrison's press conference, the rushed timeline, Jake's desperate assault. "They're not trying to kill us," Marcus realized. "They're trying to stop us from seeing what's coming." The satellite phone crackled with Agent Chen's voice. "Morrison's planning to use the press conference as cover. His team is moving 30 million in product through a shipping container tonight. The scandal will distract from the transfer." "Not if we move first," Anna said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I can track the shipment. But we need to get this data out now." Jake's voice carried up again, closer this time. "Last chance, Thompson. Think about your wife." Sarah checked her ammunition. "They're getting desperate. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it fast." Marcus looked at Anna, then at the USB drive that had started it all. They had the evidence to bring down not just corrupt cops, but an entire criminal empire. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. The building shook with an explosion from below. Jake's team was done waiting. As Sarah barricaded the door, Marcus and Anna raced against time to upload their evidence. Their separate missions had become one, and failure meant more than just blowing their covers. It meant letting Morrison's operation continue destroying communities like the one this center was meant to protect. Upload at 89%, Anna reported as footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Just need 2 more minutes." Marcus checked his weapon. "Let's make them count." The aftermath of the confrontation at the community center left. The parking lot filled with flashing police lights and federal vehicles. Marcus, Anna, and Sarah had managed to escape through a maintenance shaft moments before Jake's team breached the office, but not before securing something more valuable than their lives: the complete upload of the evidence. Inside a secure FBI command center hastily established in a nearby hotel, Marcus watched the footage from Anna's planted cameras. The scenes played out in crisp detail. Jake and Tony planting evidence, making calls to Senator Morrison, coordinating with other corrupt officers. Each frame was another nail in their coffin. "Morrison's press conference is in 10 hours, Agent Chen said, spreading surveillance photos across the table. "His shipping container arrives at the port in 6. We have to move before both." Anna's fingers flew across her keyboard, tracking financial transfers. "The money's moving. Multiple accounts, all offshore. They're trying to clear everything before morning." "Jake and Tony?" Marcus asked, pressing an ice pack to his bruised shoulder. Sarah checked her tablet. "In the wind, they slipped our perimeter during the chaos, but they left something interesting behind." She placed Tony's phone on the table. "He dropped it during your fight. Our tech team just cracked it." The phone contained a video message from Senator Morrison himself, recorded hours earlier. "Clean up the Thompson situation permanently. The shipment has to go through tonight. Some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." "Smug bastard," Chen muttered. "He still thinks he's untouchable." A commotion outside the command center drew their attention. Detective Carter burst in, his face grim. "We've got trouble. Jake just took Susan Chen hostage. My sister." Agent Chen's face went pale. "How did they even know about her?" "They've had access to personnel files for months," Anna explained, pulling up more documents from the USB drive. "They've got contingency plans for targeting family members of every federal agent in the state." Marcus studied the port's layout on a digital display. "They're desperate. Taking a hostage means they've lost their escape route. They'll try to use Susan to negotiate safe passage for the shipment. We can't let that shipment go through, Carter said. The amount of drugs they're bringing in, it would destroy communities across the state. Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert. Jake's asking for a trade. Susan for safe passage, and all copies of the evidence. The room fell silent. Agent Chen stared at the video feed, showing her sister bound in what appeared to be a warehouse office. Years of training ward with personal feelings on her face. We have options, Marcus said, his tactical mind already working. Anna's tracking program found a pattern in their movements. They're not just running, they're heading somewhere specific. Anna nodded, pulling up a map. The warehouse district, all their shell companies, their property holdings, they form a pattern. There's only one location that makes sense for holding a hostage. Building 247, Carter confirmed, checking his notes. It was purchased 6 months ago by a company linked to Morrison, officially abandoned, but there's been regular power usage. They're getting sloppy, Sarah observed. A month ago, they would have had better contingencies in place. Marcus studied the warehouse blueprints Anna had pulled up. Because a month ago, they weren't rushing. Something's forced Morrison's hand. This shipment, the press conference, it's all happening too fast. Here's why, Anna said, enlarging a document. Morrison's been financing his operation through a series of loans. His lenders want repayment, and they're not the kind of people who accept excuses. If this shipment doesn't go through, he loses everything, Chen finished, including his protection. Carter's radio crackled with an update. Jake had given them 1 hour to respond to his demands. In the port, Morrison's container ship was approaching the harbor. Time was running out for all of them. We need to split up, Marcus decided. 1 team for Susan, 1 for the shipment. If we time this right, we can catch them all, Anna finished. But Jake and Tony will be expecting that. They've studied our tactics, our procedures. Then we'll have to do something unexpected. Marcus turned to the group, something they won't find in any procedure manual. As they began planning, surveillance feeds showed movement at the warehouse. Jake and Tony were getting nervous, making mistakes. But cornered animals were the most dangerous, and these particular animals had nothing left to lose. The next hour would determine everything, not just Susan Chen's fate, but whether Morrison's entire operation would crumble or survive. The evidence was secure, but evidence alone wouldn't save Susan's life. They needed a plan that would do both. Anna's testimony before the hastily assembled federal task force cut through the early morning air. The conference room at the FBI field office buzzed with tension as she methodically laid out the evidence. Senator Morrison's operation isn't just about drugs, she explained, cycling through financial documents on the screen. It's about power. Every major construction project, every city contract, every police promotion, all of it filtered through his network of shell companies and corrupt officials. The room's attention shifted as Agent Chen burst in, her phone pressed to her ear. Jake's making his move. He's streaming video of Susan to local news stations. If we don't meet his demands in 30 minutes, he goes live with it. Marcus studied the video feed from the warehouse where Susan was held. Something about the camera angle nagged at him. Anna, can you enhance the window reflection? Anna's fingers flew across the keyboard. The image sharpened, revealing a crucial detail in the glass. The reflection of a distinctive water tower. That's not building 247, Marcus said suddenly. There at the old textile factory, Jake's trying to misdirect us while they move the hostage. Outside the federal building, news vans were already gathering. Morrison's press conference was scheduled to begin in an hour, and reporters were hungry for any connection to the mysterious drug bust rumors circulating through the city. Senator Morrison's office just released a statement, Sarah reported, reading from her tablet. These baseless accusations are a desperate attempt by corrupt elements within law enforcement to discredit a dedicated public servant. He's playing offense, Carter observed, using the media attention to paint himself as the victim. Anna's computer chimed with an alert. The Port Authority just cleared Morrison's container ship for priority docking. They're expediting the process. Marcus checked his watch. They had to coordinate 3 simultaneous operations: rescue Susan, intercept the shipment, and prevent Morrison from controlling the narrative at his press conference. We need to send authenticated copies of the evidence to every major news outlet, Anna suggested. The moment Morrison steps up to that podium. No, Marcus interrupted. That's what he's expecting. He'll have a contingency plan for a media leak. We need to do something he won't anticipate. Agent Chun's face lit up with understanding. We let him have his press conference. What? Carter protested. We can't let him spin this. We don't, Marcus explained. We let him walk into that press room thinking he's in control. Meanwhile, Anna caught on, already typing. I can hack the presentation system. When he tries to show his prepared statement, every screen in that room will show the evidence instead, Sarah finished. Live in front of every major network. The plan came together rapidly. Teams were dispatched to the textile factory, coordinating with SWAT for Susan's extraction. Port Authority officials, quietly contacted through secure channels, prepared to delay the container ship's processing just long enough for a routine inspection. But Jake wasn't done. A new video arrived. This one showing Susan with a timer beside her. Insurance, his voice narrated, in case anyone gets brave. The bomb squad's preliminary assessment was grim. The device was sophisticated, with multiple redundancies. Any rescue attempt would trigger it. Wait, Anna said, studying the video. The timer's digital signal. I've seen this before. It's operating on a specific frequency. If we can broadcast a matching signal, we could freeze the countdown, Chen finished. Give us time to disarm it. Marcus watched the morning sun rising over the city. In less than an hour, Morrison would step up to that podium, believing himself untouchable. Jake and Tony would be watching for any rescue attempt at the textile factory. And somewhere in the port, millions in drugs were about to change hands. Chen, take the bomb squad to the factory, Marcus ordered. Carter, coordinate with Port Authority. Anna and I will handle Morrison. Be careful, Sarah warned. Morrison's security detail isn't just for show. They're private contractors, ex-military. As the teams deployed, Anna caught Marcus's arm. There's something else. The USB drive contained one more file, evidence of another operation, bigger than Morrison. Someone was using his network for something else, something they wiped from the records. One crisis at a time, Marcus replied, but he made a mental note. If there was something bigger than Morrison's operation, they'd need to be ready. The city was waking up to what would become a historic day. In 3 locations, teams of federal agents prepared to move. Success would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and more than a little luck. Failure meant not just a lost hostage and escaped criminals, but the continuation of a corruption network that had poisoned the city for years. Marcus checked his weapon one last time. Ready, Anna nodded, closing her laptop. Just like our honeymoon in Budapest. Marcus froze. You knew about that mission. We really need to compare notes when this is over. She smiled, heading for the door. Coming. The press conference room hummed with anticipation as Senator Morrison approached the podium. Camera flashes illuminated his confident smile, the smile of a man who believed he had everything under control. From their position in the building's security control room, Marcus and Anna watched through surveillance feeds. Thanks to Anna's hacking, they had access to every camera in the building, including the private security channels. Port team in position. Carter's voice crackled through their earpieces. Container ship's been delayed. They're searching every compartment. Chen here. Another voice joined. Bomb squad's ready. Anna, we need that signal interference now. Anna's fingers danced across her keyboard, sending frequency match. Now timer should be frozen. On a separate monitor, they watched the textile factory feed. The bomb's digital display flickered, then froze. Susan Chen remained unconscious but alive, while Jake and Tony paced nervously. unaware their insurance policy had been neutralized. Morrison began his speech. "My fellow Americans, we gather here today to address malicious allegations. Ready?" Marcus asked, his hand hovering over the control panel. Anna nodded, executing her final command. Every screen in the press room suddenly flickered, then changed. Morrison's carefully prepared slides were replaced by surveillance footage, financial records, and damning evidence of his corruption. The senator's composure cracked as he watched his own face appear on the screens, caught on Anna's hidden cameras, discussing drug shipments with Jake and Tony. The room erupted in chaos. "Security breach." Morrison's private security team leader shouted, "Get the senator out now." But they never reached him. FBI agents, positioned throughout the crowd disguised as reporters, moved first. Morrison's attempt to flee was cut short as federal agents surrounded the podium. "Senator," Morrison Marcus announced, stepping into the room, "you're under arrest for drug trafficking, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder." Simultaneously, at the textile factory, Chen's team breached the building. The frozen timer had given Jake and Tony a false sense of security. They never saw the tactical team coming through the ventilation system. "FBI" on the ground. The command echoed through the factory floor. Jake reached for his weapon but found himself facing not just federal agents, but Detective Carter and a full SWAT team. Tony, reading the situation better, raised his hands in surrender. "It's over, Jake," Carter said firmly. "Morrison's been arrested. The shipment's been seized. We have everything." "You don't understand," Jake laughed bitterly. "Morrison was just the beginning. There's something bigger." A shot rang out. Jake collapsed, a sniper's bullet through his shoulder. From the rafters, Sarah lowered her rifle. "He was reaching for a detonator," she reported calmly. "Old habits die hard." At the port, the routine inspection had revealed exactly what they expected. $30 million worth of drugs, concealed in modified shipping containers. But they found something else too. Weapons, high-grade military hardware, and documents suggesting connections to international terror cells. "Marcus," Carter's voice was tense. "You need to see this." Jake was right. Morrison's operation, it was a cover for something bigger. Back at the press conference, Anna was already connecting the dots. The corrupted police force, the drug network, the weapons, all of it had been building to something larger. Morrison wasn't the mastermind, he was middle management. As federal agents led the senator away in handcuffs, he turned to Marcus with an unsettling smile. "You think this is a victory? You have no idea what's coming. I was containing it, controlling it. Now it's loose." Marcus met Ina's eyes across the room. They'd stopped the immediate threat, saved Susan, and exposed the corruption. But Morrison's cryptic warning suggested their work was far from over. "We need to talk," Anna said, holding up her laptop, "about what I found in those encrypted files. About why 2 federal agencies really sent undercover agents to this city. About what's really coming." Outside, reporters clamored for statements as Morrison was led to a waiting federal vehicle. The morning sun illuminated a city waking up to a new reality. One where the surface layer of corruption had been peeled back to reveal something darker underneath. Jake and Tony were in custody. Susan Chen was safe. The drug shipment was seized. By any measure, it was a successful operation. But as Marcus watched Morrison's unsettling smile fade into the back of a federal transport vehicle, he knew this wasn't the end. "So," he said to Anna, "about that honeymoon in Budapest." She smiled, closing her laptop. "First, we need to discuss what I found about Operation Shadowfall, because whatever Morrison was afraid of, it's already here." The sun climbed higher over the city as Marcus and Anna walked out of the building together, no longer hiding their true identities from each other. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning, and this time they would face it together. Behind them, in the evidence room of the federal building, Anna's laptop continued decrypting the final files from the USB drive, slowly revealing the true scope of what they had stumbled upon. The web of corruption they had exposed was just the beginning, a single strand in a much larger, darker tapestry that reached far beyond their small city.